The summer of 1914 began with a fervent, almost romantic belief in a swift and decisive victory. Young men across Europe, spurred by patriotic fervor and propaganda, eagerly enlisted, imagining a glorious, brief campaign. Yet by autumn, this illusion had shattered against the grim reality of modern warfare. The rapid advances of the war's opening months ground to a halt, giving way to a brutal, unforeseen stalemate. The Western Front was born, a scar across the landscape of France and Belgium, stretching for hundreds of miles, defining an entirely new kind of conflict. As winter descended, the conditions plunged from merely dreadful to truly horrific. The trenches, hastily dug earthworks, became open graves. Constant rain and snow transformed the battlefields into a quagmire of thick, clinging mud, swallowing men, equipment, and hope. This was not the war of cavalry charges and glorious heroism. It was a war of attrition, fought in unimaginable squalor. Disease, from trench foot to dysentery, ravaged the weakened soldiers more effectively than enemy bullets. Rats, bloated and fearless, swarmed the trenches, feeding on the unburied dead and scraps of food, adding to the pervasive sense of disgust and despair. Shell fire was incessant, an orchestral accompaniment to suffering, turning the ground into a pockmarked lunar landscape. Barbed wire fences crisscrossed no man's land, a desolate, impossible expanse guarded by machine guns and snipers. Every moment was a test of endurance. Every breath a struggle against the elements and the enemy. Sleep was a luxury, often stolen in brief, fitful moments amidst the din and danger. The psychological toll was immense, reducing men to shells, their faces etched with chronic exhaustion and a haunting emptiness. The bright-eyed recruits of July were now hardened, weary veterans, trapped in a cold, muddy hell with no end in sight. The world had witnessed warfare before, but never on such a scale of prolonged, industrialized horror. This was the true face of 1914, a year that forever redefined the meaning of human conflict and suffering. As winter tightened its grip, the grinding reality of trench warfare solidified into an inescapable nightmare for the men on the front lines. The initial patriotic zeal had long since evaporated, replaced by a profound, soul-wearying exhaustion. Every day was a battle against the elements as much as against the enemy. The biting wind relentlessly scoured the exposed trenches, chilling bones to the marrow, while omnipresent dampness seeped into uniforms, boots, and spirits. Water often stood ankle-deep, sometimes knee-deep, in the fire bays and dugouts, turning skin raw and leading to the dreaded trench foot, a slow, agonizing decay of flesh. Food, when it arrived, was often cold, meager, and monotonous, offering little comfort or sustenance against the brutal conditions. Sleep was a restless, fitful escape, constantly interrupted by the distant rumble of artillery or the sudden crack of a sniper's rifle. Sleep was a restless, fitful escape, constantly interrupted by the distant rumble of artillery or the sudden crack of a sniper's rifle. Faces once vibrant with youth were now hollowed by chronic sleep deprivation and malnutrition, eyes bloodshot and haunted, reflecting an inner world stripped bare of optimism. Beards matted with mud and grime clung to gaunt cheeks, further obscuring the men who once were. The air was thick with the stench of mud, stagnant water, unwashed bodies, and the ever-present cloying smell of decay from unburied casualties nearby. Hope became a precious, scarce commodity, rationed out in fleeting moments of camaraderie or the anticipation of a letter from home. But even these glimpses of normalcy were fleeting. The constant threat of death, whether from a shell, a bullet, or disease, hung heavy, a silent, pervasive presence. This was not merely suffering. It was a complete siege on the human spirit, a relentless erosion of identity, where survival became the only meaningful victory, a testament to unimaginable endurance in a world that had forgotten comfort, warmth, and peace. The unrelenting brutality of the Western Front created an environment of shared suffering, paradoxically fostering a strange, localized empathy. As days bled into weeks and weeks into months, the soldiers in opposing trenches, often mere yards apart, grew intimately familiar with each other's routines, their distinct accents, even their cries of pain. The abstract enemy, a faceless uniform, slowly began to acquire a human dimension. There were no grand pronouncements, rather a gradual erosion of the official animosity began with small, almost imperceptible acts. Sometimes a brief unofficial truce would emerge to recover the wounded or bury the dead, a humanitarian gesture observed by both sides, often initiated with a raised white flag or a simple shouted agreement. These brief pauses, though born of necessity, offered a fleeting glimpse of shared humanity. As Christmas approached, a faint, almost defiant spirit of the season began to stir. The British trenches, accustomed to carols and festive traditions, saw men humming tunes. Across the desolate expanse of no man's land, these faint melodies, carried on the frosty air, sometimes reached German ears. Then came the calls, tentative at first, shouted greetings in broken English or German, often accompanied by cautious waves. "Merry Christmas," one might call out, receiving a hesitant "Frohe Weihnachten" in return. These were not commands from above, but an organic, spontaneous yearning for a moment of peace, a brief respite from the relentless grind of combat. Small acts of curiosity and compassion began to pierce the fog of war. Soldiers peered over their parapets, risking a sniper's bullet, their eyes searching the opposing trench not for targets, but for faces. The shared misery had forged an unexpected, unspoken bond, hinting at a possibility that defied military logic, that even amidst such profound hatred, humanity could still whisper across the divide. The stage was set for an unprecedented, unofficial cessation of hostilities, driven not by generals, but by the soldiers themselves. As Christmas Eve descended upon the Western Front, an unusual, almost sacred quiet began to settle, profound and deeper than any previous night. The biting frost intensified, yet something else stirred in the frigid air, a nascent, almost unbelievable hope. The first signs emerged from the German trenches. Faint, flickering lights appeared, small candles initially, then miniature fir trees, defiantly placed on sandbags or parapets. These humble trees, often decorated with scraps of paper or ribbons rather than traditional ornaments, radiated a stark yet powerful spirit of the season. Then a haunting baritone voice, clear and strong, pierced the night's stillness, singing Stille Nacht, Heilige Nacht. This iconic carol, carried by the frosty air across the desolate expanse of no man's land, resonated profoundly with the British soldiers huddled in their opposing lines. A moment of stunned, disbelieving silence descended, quickly giving way to a murmur of recognition, then a tentative, emotional response. British voices, initially hesitant and raw, began to rise in harmony, offering their own rendition of Silent Night in English. This spontaneous exchange of carols transcended language barriers, a universal hymn of peace emerging from the brutal depths of war. Soon, more lights appeared on the British parapets, small gestures of reciprocation, acknowledging the fragile bridge being built. The darkness of no man's land, usually a deadly void, transformed into a temporary, surreal stage for an impromptu, unarmed concert. The songs continued, echoing back and forth. "O come all ye faithful," the first Noel, each note a fragile yet potent bridge across the chasm of conflict. Soldiers, huddled against the cold, listened intently, tears often welling in their eyes, momentarily transported from the grim reality of the trenches, reminded of homes and families. The shared singing was a powerful, silent protest against the madness surrounding them, a collective reclaiming of a sacred tradition amidst the profanity of war. These melodies, simple yet profound, created a temporary sanctuary, a sacred pause where the harsh lines between friend and foe blurred, replaced by the universal, comforting bond of Christmas. As the last notes of the carols faded, an even more profound silence settled over no man's land, now imbued with a fragile, almost unbelievable sense of peace. The shared music had forged an invisible bridge, but the physical chasm of mud and wire remained. Then a bold, tentative act, a solitary German soldier, perhaps waving a small white cloth or simply gesturing, slowly rose from his trench. His movement was mirrored, moments later, by a British counterpart, equally hesitant, equally vulnerable. It was a perilous gamble, an unspoken agreement to temporarily suspend the brutal realities of war. Slowly, cautiously, more figures began to emerge from both sides, wrapped in heavy greatcoats, their faces etched with a mixture of fear, curiosity, and a deep, unexpected longing for connection. They stepped onto the frozen, corpse-strewn ground that had, moments before, been a death trap. Wrapped in heavy greatcoats, their faces etched with a mixture of fear, curiosity, and a deep, unexpected longing for connection, they stepped onto the frozen, corpse-strewn ground that had, moments before, been a death trap. No man's land, a scarred expanse usually reserved for bullets and cries, transformed into an impromptu meeting ground. Initially, the approach was guarded. Hands remained close, expressions wary. Yet, as they drew closer, eyes met, not as enemies, but as fellow men enduring the same unimaginable conditions. The first words exchanged were simple, halting. Merry Christmas, Frohe Weihnachten. Tobacco, chocolate, and rum were offered, bridging the initial awkwardness. A German barber even gave a British soldier a haircut. Here, amidst the frozen mud and the ever-present stench of war, rank and nationality momentarily dissolved. They were farmers, factory workers, sons, fathers, men who, for this brief, miraculous interlude, chose humanity over hostility. It was an astonishing, spontaneous act of defiance against the very purpose of their presence, a testament to the enduring power of compassion in the face of conflict. As the initial tension evaporated in no man's land, replaced by the unexpected warmth of shared humanity, the spontaneous truce quickly escalated beyond mere greetings. What began as an exchange of pleasantries and small comforts blossomed into an extraordinary display of camaraderie. Soldiers, no longer foes but fellow men, initiated makeshift football games. A tin can, a sandbag, or even a crumpled piece of paper served as a ball, kicked across the shell-pocked muddy earth. British, German, and sometimes French soldiers, momentarily shedding their rigid uniforms of animosity, chased after it with a shared, almost childlike enthusiasm, their laughter echoing where artillery had once roared. These were not organized matches, but joyful, chaotic scrambles, a poignant symbol of their collective desire for normalcy. Beyond the impromptu sports, a bustling marketplace of humanity emerged. British woodbines were eagerly traded for German cigars, plum pudding for rich, dark sausage. Buttons, regimental badges, and even personal photographs were exchanged. Souvenirs not of conquest, but of an improbable, fleeting peace. Language barriers were playfully overcome with gestures, shared jokes, and the universal language of simple gifts. Stories were swapped of homes, families, and the lives left behind, revealing startling commonalities between men who, just hours earlier, had been ordered to kill each other. There was a profound, poignant recognition that these weren't faceless enemies, but individuals with fears, hopes, and dreams identical to their own, all yearning for an end to the brutal conflict. Amidst the ruins, the barbed wire, and the ever-present threat of renewed conflict, the spirit of Christmas transcended the grim realities of war. For a precious few hours, the lines blurred, and the shared ordeal forged a powerful, unspoken bond. This extraordinary, fragile truce was more than a mere pause in fighting. It was a profound affirmation of shared human spirit, a beacon of hope in the heart of unimaginable darkness, proving that even in the most desperate circumstances, compassion could bloom. Amidst the remarkable camaraderie of games and shared gifts, the Christmas truce facilitated an even more profound and poignant act: the sacred pause to bury the dead. For days, the fallen of both sides had lain uncollected in no man's land, grim testaments to the brutal fighting that had preceded the truce. Now, under a sky free of shell fire, a somber procession began. Soldiers who had been shooting at each other hours earlier now moved with a shared, quiet purpose. British Tommies and German Lancer, sometimes French poilus, collaborated, identifying the bodies of their comrades, gently collecting them from the frozen, muddy earth. The grim task was undertaken with universal solemnity. Makeshift stretchers were fashioned, and the fallen were carried back, not to separate lines, but to common ground. Graves were dug side by side, often marked with simple crosses or helmets. The shared grief transcended national allegiances. A shared humanity superseded the orders of war. They stood together, hats removed, some offering prayers in their native tongues, others simply bowing their heads in silent respect. There was no enemy in this act, only fellow soldiers acknowledging the ultimate price of conflict. This quiet, harrowing ritual highlighted the core truth of the truce, that beneath the uniforms and national anthems lay men with identical hopes and fears, united in their suffering. There was no enemy in this act, only fellow soldiers acknowledging the ultimate price of conflict. The temporary suspension of hostilities for this sacred duty was perhaps the most powerful testament to the truce's unifying force, a stark, painful reminder of the cost of the war, yet also a powerful symbol of empathy. It was a shared moment of profound respect, an acknowledgement that even in the darkest theater of war, there remained an inviolable dignity in death and a collective human responsibility to honor it. The shared moment of profound respect in no man's land was, however, a fragile anomaly. Far from the muddy, frozen trenches, in the comparative comfort of chateaus and headquarters, the High Command observed the burgeoning fraternization with growing alarm. Reports of enemy soldiers mixing, exchanging gifts, and even playing football reached generals' desks via telegraph and frantic courier. For these commanders, steeped in rigid military doctrine, this was not a heartwarming display of humanity, but a grave breach of discipline, a dangerous undermining of fighting spirit, and a potential compromise of national security. Field Marshal Sir John French, commanding the British Expeditionary Force, and his German counterparts viewed the truce as unpardonable insubordination, potentially jeopardizing offensive operations and fostering dangerous sentiments of premature peace. Field Marshal Sir John French, commanding the British Expeditionary Force, and his German counterparts viewed the truce as unpardonable insubordination, potentially jeopardizing offensive operations and fostering dangerous sentiments of premature peace. Their faces, often grim and unyielding, reflected intense disapproval. Orders swiftly cascaded down the chain of command, sternly forbidding any further interaction with the enemy. Urgent dispatches, marked immediate and top secret, were drafted by tense staff officers and disseminated through the ranks, explicitly threatening severe disciplinary action, including court-martial, for any soldier engaging in further fraternization. The High Command profoundly feared such displays of common humanity would rapidly erode the martial spirit, blur lines of allegiance, and make it considerably harder for soldiers to return to the brutal business of killing. To them, the enemy was precisely that, an enemy, to be fought and decisively defeated, not befriended. Their paramount concern was not for individual peace, but for the strategic integrity of the entire war effort. The stark reality was that the war had to continue at all costs, and any act suggesting otherwise was a direct threat to victory. Officers on the ground were explicitly instructed to re-establish aggressive patrolling, resume artillery bombardments, and intensify sniper activity. The unofficial truce, born of desperation and fleeting Christmas spirit, was to be extinguished without hesitation. The warmth of temporary peace was replaced by the cold, unforgiving logic of military strategy. The directives from high command were unequivocal and chillingly effective. The fragile peace that had bloomed briefly in no man's land withered under the iron fist of military discipline. As Christmas Day dawned into Boxing Day, a palpable shift occurred along the front. Soldiers who just hours before had exchanged gifts and laughter were now forced to confront the impossible task of becoming enemies once more. The camaraderie dissolved, replaced by a heavy sense of resignation and the grim weight of duty. Reluctantly, men returned to their respective trenches. The shared ground, briefly a neutral meeting place, once again became the perilous expanse of no man's land. Officers, under strict orders, began to enforce the resumption of hostilities. Small acts of defiance were met with swift, severe consequences, but most soldiers understood the futility of resistance. The war machine, temporarily stalled by a collective act of humanity, lurched back into motion. The first shots were fired, tentatively, almost apologetically, piercing the quiet air that had held carols and conversation. Artillery, silenced for a precious day, began its low rumble and eventual thunder once more. Artillery, silenced for a precious day, began its low rumble and eventual thunder once more. Snipers, their targets previously brothers in a temporary truce, now peered through scopes with heavy hearts. The very act of raising a rifle against a face that had just hours ago offered a cigarette or shared a family photo was an agonizing betrayal of the human spirit. The divide was absolute and cruelly reimposed. Barbed wire, shell craters, and the constant threat of death once again defined the landscape. The momentary bridge of empathy collapsed, leaving behind only the chasm of war. Yet something lingered, the memory of shared laughter, of a football kicked in the mud, of silent respect for the fallen, etched itself into the minds of those who lived it. It was a memory that proved, however fleetingly, that even in the abyss of total war, humanity could find a voice. The Christmas truce shattered, but its spirit endured as an impossible whisper of peace amidst the unyielding roar of conflict. Though the Christmas truce was ultimately shattered by military command, its brief, improbable existence left an indelible mark on history. It was a fleeting moment that defied the brutal logic of total war. A spontaneous uprising of humanity against the machinery of conflict. The memory of that extraordinary day when sworn enemies laid down their arms to share carols, cigarettes, and a game of football persisted long after the guns resumed their deadly chorus. The stories of the truce, initially suppressed by authorities, began to surface through letters sent home by soldiers, later corroborated by official accounts and countless historical investigations. These poignant narratives revealed a universal truth. Beneath the uniforms and nationalistic fervor, there lay a common humanity. It highlighted the profound disconnect between the high command, safe behind the lines, and the ordinary soldiers enduring unimaginable suffering in the trenches. The generals saw betrayal, the men saw brotherhood. The Christmas truce became more than just a historical anomaly. It transformed into a powerful symbol. It stands as a testament to the innate human desire for peace, even in the most hostile environments. It reminds us that even when pushed to the extremes of conflict, compassion can emerge, offering a glimpse of what is possible when dialogue replaces division. This fragile peace, born in the mud and freezing cold of no man's land, resonates through the decades. Its legacy endures, not as a model for ending wars, but as a potent reminder of the individual's capacity to transcend hatred. It challenges us to look beyond perceived differences and find common ground, even with those we are taught to despise. The Christmas truce compels us to reflect on the choices made in conflict and the profound, often tragic consequences. As we navigate our own times full of division and discord, the impossible truce of 1914 serves as an eternal beacon, a whisper of hope echoing across a century, urging us to remember that peace is always possible if only we dare to seek it.